Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Backyard Farmer. Thank you for joining us for another hour of answering your gardening questions. You can submit those questions by dialing 402-472-1212 if you live in Lincoln. Our toll-free number is 800-676-5446. Emailed questions and JPEG pictures can be sent to byf@unl.edu. We answer those on a future show. We do need to know as much information about your issue as you can give us, including what part of the state you live in. Backyard Farmer is also available during the week on our social media network that includes Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Pinterest. So to start tonight, Jim, you have a sample that some of us knew exactly why you brought it.
Oh, really? Yeah. And I thought it was the first time ever. Okay, well, you know what I have here is a butterfly bush, and thanks to Jeff, there's a humongous planting on the south side of our building. Butterfly bush, we love it because it attracts all the butterflies, and the students love it too for collecting. Well, lo and behold, you know, we've had some warm weather. This is how that really looks, just starting to bloom now. All right, and then we move to the other side, and guess what? We already have symptoms of spider mite infestation. You see the leaves here, how they're progressively, as you move up toward the plant, at the bottom of the plant or stems, you have really awful looking leaves that are turning yellow, and they're stippled, and eventually they will turn bronzy colored and just dry out. And as you move upward the plant, you have some nice healthy leaves up here. But spider mites typically start out in the season at the lower portions of plants. So remember things like even your garden crops. Think of tomatoes and your beans. Here's butterfly bush. We have rose bushes. But when you're out in the landscape, take a look and see at the bases of the plants to see if there's any indications of that stippling that's indicative of spider mites. And so when you first see that, you can really hammer it with a strong jet of water, maybe insecticidal soap. If it's a cool day, which I don't know if we'll ever have for a while, you could use a horticultural oil spray, or like Lauren would say, you could just rogue out these stems that are heavily infested. So just be aware that we're entering spider mite season a little bit early this year because we've had these really hot spells, and they love the hot and dry conditions. And so number one mite enemy of the garden and the landscape.
Awesome, thank you. And you do have a lovely display of spider mites always.
Well, thank you.
Okay, Matt, you have a weed loveliness.
Oh yes, the infamous yellow nutsedge plant. I think it was a month ago. I showed one in its basically emerging stage, and now we're full bore into the growing season. We got another good wave of heat, which the nutsedge loves. And what I'm trying to show with this plant here is that there are they basically start out as one plant in the beginning of the year from a tuber. So they'll emerge from one tuber, and then they'll shoot out with the rhizomes and spread. So that's how they grow so quickly and spread so quickly. You won't see them one year, and the next year you have this big patch of yellow nutsedge. And in well-watered turf or well-watered bare areas, it can grow 2-3 feet radius or circumference in 1 year. So with this one, what I was showing is, people ask, when to treat it. Typically, if you see it, that's the best time to treat it. Because now we're seeing that in the longer growing season, we're getting to the stage where these plants are starting to set new tubers. And if I find one here, right here, we already have a tuber forming. So at this stage, you want to treat it for sure, because if you don't treat it now, these tubers are going to continue to form. And by the time they get mature and they complete forming these tubers, controlling them is going to be impossible. So next year, these tubers are going to emerge, and they're going to quadruple your size of nutsedge. So what we're looking at is, getting control before we create those tubers, or the plant creates them. So typically, early June to now is a good time to be treating for yellow nutsedge and getting a handle on it. And it's not going to be a yearly thing. It's going to be every year, not just once a year, but multiple times throughout the seasons, because controlling all the tubers is almost impossible. So it's a constant battle that you can never win.
Right.
Maybe in the long run.
It gives gardeners something to do.
Yeah, it gives you something to do, that's for sure.
Oh, that's just a lovely fan.
Well, kind of in the theme that Matt started here of never being able to win. So
That's
thank you
right.
for
Yep.
leading into that.
We'll
That was
just-
nice.
Let people down easy.
Yeah, right. So here's another little condition, and I'm sitting in the pathology chair, so I'm trying to bring a little beauty into it. So I thought I'll bring in the golden cypress here. So this is a chlorotic bald cypress. And with chlorosis, we'll see it in a variety of trees, and really pin oak is the only one that you can effectively treat. Bald cypress is one that we will see chlorosis in sometimes, and it will continue to live and do fairly well as a chlorotic tree for some time. But eventually it kind of has an effect on it. So it's just probably not producing the amount of sugar it needs to maintain a thrifty life, and it'll eventually decline. But we're seeing that right now. So if you have a bald cypress at home and you think, gosh, what did we do wrong? It's unlikely you've done anything wrong. It's just the conditions weren't right for it. And so if it's a younger tree, you're probably better off replacing it sooner than later. If it's an older tree, you can continue to keep it. And I guess for us, we have a few big ones on campus that are kind of shining lights in a dark landscape sometimes. So enjoy it while you can, but you'll eventually have to replace the tree.
And if you have one that color, it's not a cultivar and it's not a disease.
Right, yeah, that's right. It'll be hard to sell, so.
And hard to treat.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Sarah, a little beautiful bounty for the
Yeah.
bees and everybody else.
Thought I would bring something pretty tonight. So here I have a couple of different cultivars of Monarda, or bee balm is a common name for this plant. And this is another great butterfly plant for the garden. Bees and butterflies love them. And they're pretty easy to grow. They like good, nice, sunny areas. Don't need any real special soil. And they'll do very well. So the cultivars I have here, the red one is called Jacob Klein. And it gets to be in the 30 to 36 inch height range, something along that line. The purplish pink flowers are a shorter cultivar called Prairie Gypsy, which will be more in the 24 to maybe a few inches taller than that, about in that height range, so just a little bit smaller. But what I wanted to point out is that one thing that bee balm is very susceptible to is a disease called powdery mildew. And some of the cultivars, we can see them looking pretty ragged, toward midsummer, because the powdery mildew has really caused the leaves to turn brown and curl up and look, not very nice. These two cultivars, though, are two that are very resistant to powdery mildew. And so if you're thinking about adding a new perennial to the garden and you wanted something with some bright color like this red Jacob Klein, this would be a great one, to add in the garden, and especially if you're looking to add plants for butterfly habitat. So that would be a great one to add. So anyway, Monarda Bee Balm.
Very beautiful.
Very nice for the garden.
And in the mint family, but
Yes.
not a thug.
Right.
All right, Jim, you get the first picture question. This is a Rembrandt, Iowa viewer in Buena Vista County. Great pictures. He has attached these pictures, the moths and the apple insect trap. And so he uses dormant spray, good cleanup. He wants to know what he has caught on his tanglefoot ball there.
Yeah, on the red sphere, that is for capturing apple maggot. And of course, there's going to be all kinds of other flies that are flying around that will be attracted to that as well. So it's really important to be able to recognize apple maggot adult. And it's smaller than a housefly, but it has these wonderful patterns on the wings that make it look like a black jumping spider. So that trap is used as a monitoring tool, and very soon now apple maggots are going to be emerging because we're getting enough volume in the apple fruit where they will deposit their eggs in the fruit, and then their little maggots will mine throughout the apples during the season. So that's one of them. So very close now. If you find that, this is time for you to treat. Now the other one looks like codling moth, and that's a major pest. There's 2 generations of those per season. Anytime you have the apples drop because they're infested or damaged by codling moth, in the first generation, they're not going to be very large apples, but anytime you have those smaller green apples fall to the soil, clean them up and get rid of them, because that will get rid of some of your inoculum, if I may use that question, or that term. And then you have a second generation, and of course the apples are much larger then too. So you don't want any of that. That is mainly maintained by use of a pheromone trap which attracts the adults. And if you put 2 or 3 pheromone traps in one tree, that usually does a very good non-chemical job, you might say, of collecting the codling moths themselves. But there are also sprays and treatments that can be done as well. Lots of options that cannot be discussed in this program, but by all means check out information about the biology of these 2 pests, because they're very important. And they can be managed non-chemically if you are willing to put a lot of effort into it and use some of these monitoring traps and sticky traps.
Awesome, thanks. And thanks to that viewer for those good pictures.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, this is an Omaha viewer that has these plants growing under his cedar trees, nowhere else in his
good.
yard. Looks good. And we just so happen to have a piece of the plant.
Yes, and I
Might be
know
growing under somebody else's.
I know I've seen these around before, and I've probably pulled them in my own yard or in the area. And it took me a while to figure out actually what it was, because it looks kind of like an amaranth or one of those species, but the growth pattern is a little different. And what I came up with for what it is Virginia copperweed. And it has these flowering clusters on the stem, and that's kind of what gives it away. I don't know if you can see them very well on the camera, but they're pretty much all the way up from the base to the top. And for controlling them, pulling them out is probably the simplest thing, because they don't really have a good root system. Another thing that I found about this particular weed is that it attracts, or it's one of the first things that gets eaten by a flea beetle. So I think actually on this one you can see something bitten out of the leaves here.
Very good.
So it's actually, if you have it in an area where you don't care, you can let it be, and they'll go after this before they go after your garden. So
Awesome.
something new that I learned about that weed too. And
Awesome.
they're not all that bad, I guess.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep.
Okay, Jeff, this is a Norfolk viewer who sent us this picture just last week. And you can see those nice little shroomies in there by that lovely dandelion mat. He says, are these false morels? And he's a mushroom hunter.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I think he's right. I think that's what they are. They're in the genus Verpa, and so they are the false morels. It's not something you're going to want to eat, and there's a lot of those out there that are like that. But they do resemble, the true morels are connected at the top and the bottom, and this is just connected at the top. It's just kind of a cap. So,
and they're kind of ugly anyway.
yeah.
I was mowing my lawn and mowed through a patch of those that came up right through the lawn
Oh,
too.
really?
Which I didn't know what they were at first either, but that's what they were.
Interesting. Thanks for sending that, and don't eat. All right, Sarah, this viewer has sent a picture of a dwarf Alberta spruce and has something that he's calling this growth coming out of the side that's to the left on the screen for our viewers. Wonders what it is and what can be done about it.
You know, actually, it's kind of interesting. Dwarf Alberta spruce itself originated as a mutation in a normal-sized spruce. And it was collected as a cutting by, plantsmen and propagated because dwarf Alberta spruce has this very compact, very tight growth habit that makes it an interesting ornamental in a landscape. So what's happening in this plant is this section of the plant is reverting back to what the original spruce looked like. So this is going to have much longer growing shoots, internodes that are spaced much farther apart. It's going to have normal-sized needles and foliage. And so if you let it grow, it's going to grow into this great big long branch that will look like you have some mutant spruce branch growing out of your dwarf Alberta spruce. So you don't want that. So go ahead and prune it out, and that's all you need to do.
All right, thanks, Sarah. Well, gardeners can get a little anxious when it comes to pruning their trees. We don't want to make the wrong cuts, and we certainly don't want to end up permanently damaging our trees with those pruning saws. We've got just the answers as Nebraska forester Eric Berg is here to help us with some summer pruning tips.
We're getting into the heat of summer, and now is a great time to look at our smaller trees in our home landscapes and areas and do some selective pruning to control the vegetative growth that we've got going on. And the key is to do very limited pruning using hand tools like a hand pruner. Whenever you're looking at starting to do some pruning, always have a purpose in mind. Because remember, trees aren't like people. They don't heal, they seal over. So the more that you can minimize the purposeful damage that you're doing by pruning, the better off the health and the vigor of your trees will be. So let's talk a little bit about the what, why, when, and how of pruning. Why do we even prune? That's the purposeful wounding of the plant for a specific purpose. And remember that there's no pruning that you can do that's going to help with the health and vigor of the tree, because you're removing the tree's ability to produce food by removing leaf material. So always try and minimize that. And remember, in any given year, take no more than 1/4 of the branch structure of a tree. Why do we prune? Typically, we're pruning for a very specific purpose, such as improving the structure of the tree, removing codominant stems. But at this time of the year, I like to focus on 3 main types of pruning: removing dead branches, branches that might be rubbing, and potentially diseased branches. But other than that, pruning should be very selective and very minimal at this time of the year. Because again, remember, you're removing the plant's ability to produce food. Other tips: how do you prune? Target those very small branches. The smaller the branches, typically the better. If you're getting a large chainsaw out at this time of the year, you're doing something more than just periodic pruning during midsummer. So very selective, focus on hand pruners, maybe a small hand saw, a pole pruner sometimes. I always try and remind homeowners, if your feet are leaving the ground and you're getting on a ladder, or you're starting to prune above your head, that's the time to consider calling a certified arborist in and getting their professional opinion, because we don't want anybody hurt, and you should definitely not be up on a ladder pruning on a tree. So as another reminder, people have a tendency to get out there and just start hacking away at their trees with no specific purpose. I remind folks that you really, especially with newly planted trees, don't do anything to those trees for at least 3 to 5 years after they've been established. That leaf material left on there is going to grow, help to provide vigor and energy for the tree. Branches left lower on the stem will provide more strength, more taper, and it's okay to eventually start to prune that tree up, but give that tree a chance to get established, and eventually you can identify those permanent branches that you want to maintain, often at 6 to 8 feet, and then start to develop a good scaffolding branching system that's symmetrical up through the canopy of the tree. So the final point I want to talk about today is focus on developing a strong terminal. Remove those codominants, multiple stems that might be in the canopy of your tree early on in the life of that tree, when you can use a hand pruner. That will eliminate structural problems as that tree begins to mature. And as a reminder, you don't try and pull out a cavity or set a bone yourself. So why would you do large tree care yourself? Hire a certified arborist to do the work that's necessary to keep your trees healthy and safe.
It's a really good idea to leave those young trees alone for about 4 to 5 years to let them get established. And this time of year, you don't want to go crazy with the pruning, but certainly keep an eye out for those damaged limbs from our wonderful storms.
Yeah.
It's also awfully hot to stress
Yeah,
plants in with pruning right now. So thanks to Eric, as always, for his knowledge. All right, Jim, you get the next picture. This is from Pierce, and he says, I have these bugs on his spirea, and what can he use to treat them with? And interestingly enough, the very same day, we had a conversation with Jim Shield out in Scotts Bluff, exact same
kind of stuff.
all the way. So one side of the state to the other, they're seeing
We
this
probably
on
have had
spirea.
maybe there's been more of a uniform climatic condition in the springtime that lent itself to the boost in numbers of these aphids. But in spirea, you can have both spirea aphid, that's a simple answer, but you can also have apple aphid. And it looks to me like there's a yellow form and a blackish form in there too, and so the blackish ones are probably the ones that are about to spring wings, you know, so that they can disperse. But in any case like that, aphids and that accessible, there's really no need to treat with an insecticide. I would just suggest that it just be sprayed with a fairly strong jet of water, or you could use an insecticidal soap. And you know, eventually nature takes care of all those things, because there's lacewings and lady beetles. That's their feeding station again, you know, where they're multiplying themselves so that they can have additional benefit throughout the season. So if you see that they're already in decline, you don't really need to do too much about it, other than in the course of watering, you know, just get some good sprays.
All right, thanks, Jim. Okay, this is a Lincoln viewer, Matt. question is basically, why isn't it green and what's with the brown spots?
Probably a combination of things. I'm sure with the warm weather we've had in the last couple weeks, just fertilizing is a good one to start with, but the reason that it's probably yellow is because it's dry. It might be getting irrigated, but on those south-facing slopes like that first picture was, it seemed like that area would probably dry out a little sooner. And if it is getting overwatered, that'd be another issue with some disease. With this heat that we're having, high humidity can create some of those lighter patches in the lawn. And then with that one, with the grid in it, you can tell that it's a walk mower, obviously. So where those wheels are going over, you're kind of squashing down the grass or rolling it, so you're not mowing it off completely like you are the rest of it. And if you go in that same pattern, I think you can see a little bit around maybe the rock bed there. It's a circle, so that wheel is running in the same path every time, and you get these grids. And it looks like maybe a little bit of scalping too, maybe mowing a little bit too low or trying to take it down. That's can be remedied with a little bit of fertilizer. June is a good time to put down a little bit, even though we're in this hot weather. The grass doesn't have that readily available nitrogen, and it's not growing as fast as it was in the spring, so I think a little bit of fertilizer would help.
All right, thank you, Matt. Jeff, you have two different tree issues from two different viewers. The first is an Omaha viewer, 26-year-old maple, looks like a sugar probably, or one of them. Dead twigs in the top. I gave it to you because you have one on campus like that. And the second one is actually a willow in Red Willow County. So two different trees. Poetic, yeah.
Well, both of those look like a canker is what we're dealing with. And with the willow, it's probably black canker. There's a couple different things that could be going on with the willow that's creating this problem. And with the sugar maple as well. So I think in both cases, anytime you have a situation where you have some dieback, it's important that we get those branches out of there, go in and make sure that you're removing all the dead. You may have to cut things down, make sure you get it below, especially if there's a indentation or something in the wood, that we want to get it below that. With the maple, I'm less concerned. It looks actually pretty good. I know that there's some dead in it. With the willow, you know, this I think is probably an indication that we're going to have some issues. And while you can certainly get the dead out, I think I would be planning for a replacement at this stage.
That's pretty big for a willow anyway.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Sarah, this is a tree question. This is north of Norfolk. It's a Fort McNair horse chestnut, which is a hybrid, 2010 planted, grew well for the first 3, died to the ground, left alone, started growing again. She's wondering, is this going to be a good, safe tree when it's come like that from the base?
Yeah, you know, the red horse chestnut, which Fort McNair is one of the cultivars of red horse chestnut, unfortunately we're kind of on the northern end of their range, and so they don't tend to be quite as winter hardy as some other trees. So that may be why the tree died back originally. It might have been due to some winter issues. But even though it's looking fairly healthy now, I am concerned about that joint at the base, because you are going to get wood rot coming into the trunk from where that old trunk died back. And there's really nothing that you can do to stop that. So you're going to have wood rot in the base of the trunk there at the soil line. And you know, the tree could grow and it could have a good outer layer of tissue that develops after this that won't have wood rot in it. But my suspicion is that this is a side bud that has developed, or an adventitious bud, which has developed this new top. And those are not very strongly attached to the trunk. So if this tree in some years down the road got some heavy weight on it from some snow or some ice or something like that, there's a pretty good chance that could actually break out, that whole section of the tree. So given the fact that this tree is still pretty small at this point, it probably would be better to take it out and replant with another a Fort McNair, if that's really what you wanted there, rather than letting this one grow in the landscape.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Well, just like everybody else's garden, we have a few weeds in the Backyard Farmer Garden. Instead of pulling them, we're going to eat them. Nebraska Extension educator Terry James tells us more from the Backyard Farmer Garden this week.
This week in the Backyard Farmer Garden, we're going to look at all the cool structures that we have in the garden. We have lots of things that plants have to crawl up on. So we have some pole beans, we have some squash and watermelon, we have peas, we have tomatoes, and all of those need some structure and support because they just get way too big and flop over. So we need to keep them up off the ground. Our tomatoes, we have several different kinds. We have 10 by 10 welded wire mesh, which is the old-fashioned way that all of our grandmas always used to do. But we've kind of made a little more structure and kind of made a serpentine look to it. We have these new tomato towers that we're trying out, so we'll have to see how those work. We have some old-fashioned A-frames that we have some pole beans crawling up. And then we have some hog panels that we have attached to our raised beds where our peas are crawling up. And the newest thing is our really cool arbor to our entrance. So stop by the Backyard Farmer Garden and look at all the things that you can have your plants crawl up.
So Terry talked a lot about our tomato cages and all the great stuff we have in the garden and all those structures, and it's going to be a pretty cool year in the Backyard Farmer Garden. There is some purslane in there, but you know, we'll talk about that later maybe.
It's so
good
beautifully
tasting.
laid out this year.
Oh, I know, isn't it just great?
Yes.
Yeah.
No bugs hardly, it seems. I'm a little disappointed there.
Well, I'm sure you are. No rats and spots yet either. Just wait. Just wait. All right, Jim, this is a North Platte viewer that has an elm that has curled leaves full of juicy bugs. And
Okay.
she's thinking, are they aphids and the shiny stuff?
Okay, see, there's a woolly apple aphid which moves between, in the springtime, the eggs are actually on the elm. The aphids hatch out and they infest the elm as the leaves are coming out. And so you get these whorled masses, or what we call galls, of compressed leaves tightly together, and that's some protection for them as they feed. But this time of year, those colonies are falling apart. Naturally, you know, the predators will be on them, but they're developing wing forms, and then they fly to the apple tree, and they usually feed on the roots, and they don't really seem to cause too much harm to apple. So I would just say probably there isn't much you need to do about it. Again, just like I've said before, give it a good charge of the old water, you know, jet water hose to loosen it up a little bit and run those aphids out of there. But it's naturally in decline right now, so nothing to worry about.
All right, thanks. This is a Bertrand viewer, Matt. They want to know where they can get paraquat to kill everything.
Yeah, paraquat's going to be hard to come by. That's a restricted use product.
Yeah.
So diquat is one that's used, or we use it commonly. It basically is a contact herbicide that kills pretty much any type of grass or weed. And that product, I believe you can get. So that would be the one to go with. Paraquat is a no. That one's very dangerous. Diquat is not so dangerous, and I would check at your local stores. I don't know if there's any that carry it in the big box retailers, but you'd probably have to talk to a professional.
Matt, isn't there a Roundup formulation that has glyphosate and diquat in it? Isn't it the quick burn down Roundup that has
you're right.
diquat in it?
Yeah.
So that would be one I think that might be easier for homeowners to find.
Is that available in most of the
Yeah,
box stores?
yeah, most of the
then
big
that's
stores.
the one. That one has diquat,
Yeah.
not paraquat, but
Right.
it does the similar thing. It's just not as dangerous.
Good, awesome. Okay, Jeff, this viewer has a crabapple already dropping some yellowing leaves, and his question is why and should they buy tree stakes, fertilizer, or just water it to keep that from happening?
It sounds like it has apple scab. And because I think it also talked about the fruit being brown or something
Right,
like that too.
right.
So, you know, at this point, depending on the size of the tree, sanitation is important. So making sure we get those leaves and fruit cleaned up as they hit the ground. We don't want to keep that cycle continuing. We can't really do much if we have a lot of rain. We certainly want to make sure we're not watering a tree with overhead irrigation to encourage that. If it's not a real big tree, I guess I'd really consider replacing it with something that is disease resistant. And most of the really good crabs out there right now are. So that would probably be my long-term solution, is looking for a resistant plant.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Let's see, Sarah. This is a Geneva viewer. They want to know whether they can start a tree from the pits out of their cherries and get good cherries.
Good question. You know, most fruit trees are grown from known cultivars because they have a known fruit quality. There are a few fruit trees that you can actually grow from seeds, like peach. You can actually grow peaches from peach pits, and you can end up with a pretty good tree. If it was a tart cherry, like if it was a Montmorency or North Star, I would say you'd have better luck. If it's a sweet cherry, like Mount Rainier or something along that line, I would say less likelihood of success, because sweet cherries, we also run into winter hardiness issues. And if you grow one from seed, there's no telling what the genetics of that new plant would be, and it might not be winter hardy in Nebraska. So if you wanted to try it, I would do it with a tart cherry, not with a sweet cherry.
All right, thank you, Sarah. All right, Sarah, are you ready?
I'm ready.
We have a viewer who wants to know if they can actually get peonies to grow from the seeds they see on their peony plants.
You can. I mean, it's a long process. It's going to take you probably at least 3 years before you have a plant that will even have any flowers on it. But so, I mean, you could do it.
Okay. We have people that say their mums and their asters are already setting flower buds. Is it too late to pinch, or should they go ahead and do that?
No, you can pinch until the 4th of July, then let them go.
Speaking of chlorosis, this one's for you. This is a North Platte viewer who says, what can they apply to the soil if the whole bed is chlorotic?
Sulfur, granular sulfur, and you would just broadcast that over the bed. Fall application would be better than now. Since we're moving into the hot part of the summer, I would wait till fall.
All right. Our Rembrandt, Iowa viewer is also asking whether he should thin his apples to produce bigger fruit. And do
Yes,
that now.
definitely. You want to leave about 1 fruit per 6 inch of branch on apples.
Okay. There's a rain garden out of control in the Valentine area. If they mow it off, will those sedges and those nice monardas and things come back and flower?
They'll come back, but that would be, depending on how low you want to mow them, that would be pretty hard on the plants. If you don't have to, I wouldn't cut them down more than halfway.
In other words, just turn your head.
Yeah.
Okay, Jeff, you ready?
Like Braunschweiger.
Okay, speaking of rots, do we recommend any fungicides on a regular basis for melons and cucumbers in home gardens?
Well, I imagine there are products that are labeled for that. What I would probably focus on is making sure we have good air circulation, that we're not, some of the things we were talking about before, we're not watering overhead, so our cultural practices. I think let's focus on that and not look at the fungicides.
All right. Are you seeing any turf diseases showing up right now with this spike in the weather?
I haven't seen any yet, and maybe Matt can correct me, but at least on campus, we're not seeing anything. I think, not to throw Devaney under the bus, but I think they're having some issues right now, but they have some chronic places, so.
Okay. Do you see pine wilt in ponderosa and limber pines in the central part of the state, or is it mostly just Scotch still?
I've seen it in Austrian pine, so I haven't seen pine wilt in ponderosa.
Okay. Are there any diseases that you're aware of that attack burning bushes?
I haven't, I'm trying to think if there is. I guess I can't think of anything right now that I've had with burning bushes.
Okay, other than scale insects.
Right.
Okay, nice job. Matt, you ready?
Yep, let's do it.
So, will
bring it
white
down.
vinegar kill bindweed if it's applied just to the bindweed and not kill other plants?
I would say no.
All right. How about black Samson showing up in turf areas, thin turf, obviously? How do you kill the black Samson?
I don't know that one. I'm gonna have to pass.
Pull.
I don't know. You pull it.
Pull or
I don't know how you
pass,
kill
right?
it other than pulling it.
Lug it out.
All right, we'll take that one.
Does Roundup have a life expectancy on the shelf? And the same question for a weed and feed product.
I would guess yes, unless you're keeping it into like controlled conditions and not letting it freeze or get too hot. It'll probably last quite a few years, but if you're letting it be exposed to the elements, it's probably got a couple-year lifespan.
Okay. We have a viewer in the central part of the state that wonders how early can they seed fescue this fall?
How early? I would
How
say
early?
August 15th would be a good target date. Get it growing right when we're getting into those cooler
Okay.
weather.
How do you control tree seedlings in turf?
You mow them off.
Perfect.
Wow, good recovery, man.
Or you can mow around them.
Yeah, let them all grow.
There are a lot of nice oaks in the parks in Lincoln. I keep thinking, oh, you don't need to buy trees. You ready?
Yep, sure am.
Okay, this is a Lincoln viewer who heard the cicadas on June 13th. Is it early?
Wow, that is early. Yeah, it straggles a week before or a week after the first day of summer.
Okay, so does that mean it's 90 days till the first frost?
Yeah, it's a bunch of hogwash.
Okay. We have a viewer who wants to know how you prevent Japanese beetle, and she says it's attacking her grapes in particular.
That's too much information for this venue here, so
You can't prevent.
yeah, you can't prevent. Pass.
You guys. Okay, iris borers are in the fans of this viewer's iris, but they're not all the way down.
Well, get them before they go down in there.
How?
You can pinch them. I'd say probably pinch them rather than prune them because you want to get as much photosynthesis value out of the plant as you can before it starts to, what do you call it, go hit the summer dormancy or whatever.
Okay, we have thousands of tiny white insects with long legs that fly up out of the lawn when people are mowing.
That's probably leafhoppers, and so it's about that time of year. Leafhoppers migrate in, and so whenever you walk across the lawn, they're feeding on the lawn, but they don't seem to cause too much damage.
Awesome. Nice job. So I'm
Yeah, so we
thinking
still
either
got-
those were not lightning round questions or you guys forgot you were in the lightning round for the most part.
Yeah.
But they were very good
Yes.
answers.
Yeah.
No.
All right, Sarah, what do we have for plants of the week this week?
So this purple one we have here is an annual form of a Delphinium, and we usually call this one larkspur. And if you look here, let me pull this out a little bit so you can see the foliage. The foliage on these is very, very finely divided, so you get a real lacy kind of ferny effect on the leaves. But it will reseed itself through the landscape, and so you have these pretty little spikes of flowers. And you see we have one here that's kind of white with purple edge leaves. So they run the gamut of color from white to kind of a pale purple, almost sometimes pink, and then to the darker purples as well. So very nice perennials. They like a little bit of protection, so maybe morning sun with a little bit of afternoon shade. And again, the flower spikes, if they have a little bit of wind protection, they'll last longer too. But they make great cut flowers, and they also make great dried flowers too. Then this yellow one that we have, this is Cordalis. And it's a perennial, but it's not a real long-lived perennial. So it'll kind of come and go. But it will also reseed itself in your landscape. And so even if you don't have the individual plants coming back, it will often reseed itself. This one also likes a little bit of shade too, though. So, morning sun with some afternoon shade probably be a good location for that.
Excellent. Thanks, Sarah. And I think the larkspur is the annual and the delphinium is the perennial, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they're both in the Delphinium is the genus.
Right, exactly. Very nice. And once you've got it, you've got it.
Right, from the reseeding.
Right. All right, thank you. Very nice. All right, next picture is yours, Jim. This is a rural southern Hamilton County viewer. She's lost her Somerset seedless grapes to insects so tiny she can't see them with a magnifying glass. They attack just when the grapes have set on. What product and scheduled timing, and what is that beastie?
I really don't think that's a beastie because it's just simply too uniform of a response in the plant. I was thinking more so about poor pollination, either because of cold episode of cold weather or let's see if what was the other one? Like if it would rain, if it rained pretty heavy or something like that, and so there was an opportunity for pollination to occur. So it's just too uniform. We have things like what are called gall gnats, and we don't really have areophyte mites so much. And it's the flowers are still intact there. It's just that they haven't pollinated. So I think it's probably poor pollination.
So if she could get a picture
Yeah.
of what she thinks is an insect, if she
Right.
sees one, that might help on this.
Yeah, just grab a bunch, some
And
of the
this was-
damage. And
Kim, this was grape, right?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, so the other big issue we see on grapes, of course, is herbicide damage.
Right.
So if they had herbicide drift during the time when they were flowering, it could cause the flowers to abort.
Right.
So that, I mean, but then they would see symptoms on the foliage too. So
Yeah,
you'd
I
think
think
they'd
so,
ask
too.
about the foliage if they were
And
seeing.
then it may be a description of how vast is this that's
Right.
happening, or is it associated with a certain variety of
She did
grapes?
say
or what?
Somerset.
Just
Okay.
Somerset, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but maybe that's the only one she has.
Yeah,
Maybe.
that's true too.
So a picture of the little beastie if you can find one, or more information. All right, this is a Lincoln viewer, Matt. This probably happened all over the state. Manhole turf death.
Yes.
So all those culverts, all those manholes when it got hot and dry. And of course, his question is how to keep it from doing this, or how to bring it back if it's done this.
Well, it's mostly just a lack of water. That spot right there is going to heat up a lot faster, and there could also be underlying issues. If they put those manholes in and they put gravel next to that concrete or around the manhole, those roots only have a limited amount of water, so they're going to be the first thing to go, whereas the rest of the turf has plenty of space to grow deep. So I would say deeply water those areas if you can with a hose when we have those hot spells, and hit them early because they're going to be the first ones to go. Other than that, you could take that little strip out and put a mulch bed in, and you wouldn't have to worry about it. That would be something to take care of that.
Easier yet.
Yep.
You know, we've used warm season grasses, especially as you know,
Yep,
if
that's a good
the
one, too.
soil isn't a big issue, but heating is. I mean, and I know it's not uniform necessarily, but you could do something like a buffalo grass or
Yeah.
you know, Bermuda grass, something.
You could
One of
just
the
have a
very
little
favorite
loop of
zoysia.
buffalo
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yeah.
and make some transition out of
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
All right, thanks, guys. Jeff, this is a southwest of Lincoln viewer that has potatoes. She said one started to wilt and turn yellow at the base, spread up the plant. Now it's going to surrounding plants. She has not fertilized. They have not treated the plants with anything.
You know, I guess, and Sarah, you correct me if I'm wrong. I'm thinking early blight in potatoes is kind of
Could be.
looking at. I don't know if fusarium would be another one that may be a problem with that. So
Definitely, they are definitely susceptible to fusarium rot as well. And there are a couple of other rots too. So they might want to pull a plant out and kind of inspect the root system and see if they've got a rot that's starting.
right. And I know with the early blight, one of the issues is lack of fertility. So especially since she mentioned she didn't fertilize, I wonder if that also kind of helped perpetuate the situation.
Yeah.
So.
But good idea to pull one out, and if she needs to,
Right.
bring it up to the diagnostic clinic and see if that's really what.
And I think
going
if the
on.
vines are dead, you need to pull them up anyway.
Right. I mean, they're not
So-
going to grow back.
Right.
They're not going to come back from that.
Right.
Exactly. All right, Sarah, you have a butterfly bush question. This is a viewer who said it lived beautifully in a pot for about 3 years. They just transplanted it out of the pot into what he described as a heavy clay soil, and it's doing this. What do we think?
Well, you know, I'm wondering when they planted it if they addressed root issues. You know, because if it was in a container for 3 years, it probably had a pretty circling mass of roots. And if they didn't address that, it looks to me like it's having trouble establishing on the site. And so it's either a root issue or a watering issue or something along that line. I think the underlying question was, you know, is it worthwhile giving it a chance? And I would say yes. I mean, you still do have some leaves on there. I would give it a chance. I'd say there's a fairly low chance it's going to really survive and thrive and do great, but I mean, you certainly can try it. But double check your watering, make sure it's not getting way too dry, especially since the weather is hotter now. See if it can pull out. Mulch around the base. I think the mulch would help a little bit too.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Well, each week, Terry James gives us an update from our wonderful backyard farmer garden. She's shown us a number of varieties of All-America selections of ornamentals and vegetables, and for our second feature tonight, Terry is going to focus on our cole crops.
It's the year of the Brassicaceae. The National Garden Bureau makes the year of something every year, and Brassicaceae is one of them. So this year in the Backyard Farmer Garden, we actually decided to overplant all the Brassicaceae. Brassicaceae is actually in the mustard family. The mustard family consists of broccoli, cabbage, chard, kale, kohlrabi, lots of all those different plants. Great healthy benefits on all of them. 6 of those plants can actually be traced back to the wild mustard, such as Brussels sprouts. Brussels sprouts are in the mustard family, and they are actually bred from the axil area of the leaf to get those little round gems that all of us like to roast at Thanksgiving time. In Nebraska, you have to either start these really early in the spring or really late in the fall for a fall garden. In the spring, you can start them in the greenhouse or in your house, or like we have in our backyard farmer garden in the raised beds, we had the high tunnel, little mini high tunnel, and we started some of our cabbages there actually in February. The soils have to be about 40 degrees when you start them, but preferably about 70 degrees. So in the raised bed, our soils warm up quickly. Another thing you have to remember about these plants in the mustard family is that they have very shallow root system. So that means you either have to make sure that you're doing some very even watering and keeping them moist, especially in these hot summer days when they're just starting to get finished growing and it's drying out very fast. So make sure that you're watering them very well, keeping those roots moist and supple. Like I said earlier, we really went all out for the Brassicaceae family this year. So we have Chinese cabbage, we have broccoli, we have one of the All-America Selection cabbages, Katrina, right here in front of me. We also have 3 different kinds of kohlrabi. We have a couple different kinds of mini broccoli, which we're really excited about. So more like a broccoli rabe. We're really excited about showcasing the Brassicaceae family. We're growing them for edible reasons and the nutritious reasons, but we're also growing them because they look great with texture, color, and contrast in our backyard farmer garden.
As Terry said, these fantastic plants are not only tasty, they come with some really great ornamental varieties that look nice mixed into the garden. And if you join us this Saturday, you'll get to see a few. We might even let you have a few bites out of the leaves. Maybe. with your cake.
And the weeds?
And the weeds, eat the purslane, and the dandelions. All right, so Jim, picture question. This is a new gardener in Omaha, and she is a second-year watcher of backyard, which we appreciate. She has a few little bush bean plants that have holes in their leaves and some yellowing spots, and then she says after watering one morning, she found this little guy poking his head out of the ground near their roots.
Okay.
So what do we have
I'm not
here?
sure about the little guy that poked its head out. It doesn't, I think it's incidental, that it really doesn't have anything to do with the condition of the beans. The beans look like they're being chewed, the leaves are being chewed by bean leaf beetles, and there's 2 generations. So there's one that's probably happening right now as we speak with beetles. They will soon subside, and then there's another generation that kind of comes out in early August. So just keep that in mind. Bean leaf beetles can be controlled easily if you just keep at it, and you can use, like, if you want to use a product like pyrethrins, what's that one? There's another piola, or something like that. That's just light application of something to knock them down.
All righty,
So,
thanks, good, keep your eye on them. All right, Nutsedge, Matt, this is a Blair viewer. She has been religious with sedgehammer, but it comes back unscathed. Can you possibly kill it?
Well, if you watch the beginning of the show, it's a lifelong battle. But I think, I mean, from what we've seen too, is if you're doing it every year, you are controlling some. And depending on when you're hitting them, it's better to hit them early. The first time you see them, like right when they're emerging, that would be the better time to hit them. That way they don't have the chance to make more tubers. So if you're waiting till now to do it, or even later than this, there's possibly formation of tubers before you kill the plant with sedgehammer or with other products. So I would keep at it, maybe try and hit it earlier in the year rather than later. And that's the best you can do. I mean, short of excavating the soil and bringing in some new soil, those tubers are going to be there and they're going to be emerging for years to come.
All right, thanks, Matt. Okay, Jeff, we've had this question, and in fact, from probably this viewer, and his powdery mildew on his 9-bark has gotten so bad.
Wow.
He's really wondering what to do about it. So what do you think?
Well, I think to me, this is probably air circulation, and it's hard to see from the photos, but it seems like it's a dense plant to me. And I think, first of all, we need to go in and clean out all that material, get that out of there, and then look at doing some caning and opening that up a little bit and see if we can get some air moving in there. And again, if we're watering overhead, that's another thing. So.
All right, so sanitation, cleanup. And
And we got to get that material out. Don't throw it back behind the plant.
okay.
So.
All right, Sarah, this is a Seward viewer that has a garlic patch, and she dug up the browning plants in the middle. She said they didn't have much garlic on them, no signs of insect or disease. The rest of the crop looks okay. Any ideas?
Well, there's a couple of things that come to mind. Onions and garlics are not particularly efficient as far as developing a root system. And so if this particular area is drier, that could cause the leaves to yellow and die back like this. Or if this little area is more compact, if you have a little localized area of compaction right there, that could cause this as well. So think about that. Also nitrogen. If the nitrogen is low, again, onions and garlic they're kind of heavy feeders, and so they need a good level of nitrogen. And so if it's low in this spot, that could cause the leaf yellowing that you're seeing. Again, there's also several fungal rots of garlic. They can be a soft rot or they can be a dry, hard rot, which might be a little bit harder to spot. So you might want to pull some of these out. Well, it sounds like they already have, but that could be an issue too. So I would just check those things out and see if any of those make sense with what has been happening in that spot.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Well, we have some great announcements of fun things in the gardening world, beginning with us, and we will be on location live to tape this Saturday, 10 a.m. in the Backyard Farmer Garden. You can have a piece of cake on a cabbage leaf. That'll be excellent. 65 years old. It's worth a celebration. Our second one is Jazz in June, Tuesday, June 20th at 6 p.m. east side of Sheldon Gallery on UNL City campus. Always a great sort of an event. Our next announcement is the River City Cactus and Succulent Society 32nd Annual Sale. June 22nd in Papillion with a number on the screen, so that'll be fun as well. And our final one is our Produce from the Heart, a donation of your extra produce every Tuesday through September, 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. in the Backyard Farmer Garden. And we have some great stats, the Grow Row donations. We had 20 pounds this week. We've had 111 pounds total of produce already from the Backyard Farmer Garden in a couple of weeks. So it is amazing what you can actually grow in a garden to feed people with. So, all right, we have just a little bit of time for some very quick questions. We have a viewer who had a black walnut hit by lightning, Jim, and it's surviving carpenter ants in it. He's trying to get rid of the carpenter ants. Is that a good idea or not?
I would say if it got hit by lightning, you can go ahead and try, you can try the insecticides. It depends on the whole situation, but if you can either bait it to get rid of the carpenter ants over a period of time, that would be helpful. Or check into an insecticide, and I can't name any products right now, but there are insecticides too.
All right. Okay, Matt, this is a Trumbull viewer that has trumpet vine coming up in the lawn, and he's wondering if Roundup for Lawns will help. Concerned about killing the main vine.
Yeah, I don't know about that one for sure, but I would guess with the products in there, some of them would probably work on controlling it. Trumpet vine, some other broadleaf herbicides containing triclopyr, I think would be a good systemic product to kill those vines. Tougher to control weed.
I think I'd be killing the main vine.
Yeah.
But that's just me. All right, Jeff, this is a viewer that has knockout roses with rose rosette, and they were told it's a fungus and that it could be treated. What do we do?
It's a virus, and they need to rogue it out. So I'm waiting all night, but really, it's a virus, and you really need to rogue it out. So.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Sarah, this is an Omaha viewer that had cauliflower, broccoli, all sorts of things eaten down to nubbins. And they're wondering if they can put Miracle Grow on and rejuvenate those plants, or do they need to replant in August?
What were the vegetables again, Kim?
Cauliflower, broccoli, and cauliflower and broccoli.
No, you can't do that. They will not rehead, so you need to replant in the fall.
Yeah, I like the word nubbins. That's because that's exactly descriptive.
Right.
All right.